When did your feeling about something is very wrong here turned out to be true? I came home to my mum supposedly out for a walk and my little brother seeming worried she hadn't come back yet. I noticed her keys were hanging up. I had a sinking feeling something wasn't right. Why not take your keys? Anyway, long story short, she hasn't gone for a walk. She has locked herself in a back room in our guest house thing that you can only unlock from the inside, and had taken a whole heaps of pills to kill herself. She survived. This was over 15 years ago. Still haunts us. She was dressed in her wedding dress. My parents had just divorced. It wasn't nice. Frick is right. That it was dark. About 10 years ago, my mum said she had a really tiring day. When she was going upstairs, she said goodbye instead of good night, and it just really sat wrong with me. Checked on her a little later and she wasn't waking up, so we called 911. Turned out she had taken a bottle of pills. That really fricked me up for a while. I was terrified I was going to end up alone with my arsehole stepdad. When paramedics arrived, they asked him if she had any allergies and he said no, and it still frustrates me that I had to be the one who told them her allergies. That's fricked up, man. I sincerely hope she's doing better. Kind of a dumb one, but we had this regular customer who was very weird. I worked in an auto wrecking yard and he always came in and bought random, off the wallet. Anyhow, me and a new guy load some stuff into the back of this guy's van. He gets in to leave, a new guy is standing behind the van next to the building. I say, hey, I wouldn't stand there. New guy looks at me puzzled and moves. Sure enough, weird customer puts it in reverse and punches it. Backs right through the wall of our office. My brother and dad lived in a different state, and my brother was in the hospital recovering from an accident. My first weird feeling was when I was booking the flight to see him and I was considering cancellation insurance. What if something happens to my dad and I have to fly out sooner? I shrugged it off. My dad was doing fine. 2 weeks later, my brother tells me that my dad was visiting and went home early because he had evidently caught something and wasn't feeling well. I got a really bad feeling and called him. It went to voicemail. He did say he was going to bed early and it was about bedtime for him. I said I heard he wasn't feeling well and wanted to check in, and that I really loved him. I felt weird, but my dad would have been royally pissed if I called 911 to his house, because he was under the weather and decided to sleep it off. I decided to wait until the morning. Morning comes. Nothing. My brother sent his friend over. No answer. Friend goes in the house. My dad had passed away. I wish I had called. It just didn't seem that serious and I have a penchant for overreacting. The last thing he told my brother was, "I'll be fine. I'm just going to bed." The thing that got me was the voicemail. I looked through his messages. Mine was read. If nothing else, I know he listened to that voicemail. One of the last things he heard was me telling him I loved him. My dad did something like this while driving. Carload of family, zipping along as he was prone to doing. Then, just before a blind corner, slowed right down for no apparent reason. Like, slowed a lot more than necessary. A second or two later another car comes around the corner on our side of the road. Would have been a head-on had dad not felt the uncanny urge to ease up. I tend to slow down at harrowing looking blind corners, for this reason. Same. Whenever there is a situation while driving where another driver could do something stupid, I assume they will do it and act accordingly. I've avoided so many accidents this way. This is basically the only way to ride a motorcycle. You pretend you're invisible to traffic. Don't rely on traffic to respect your right of way or even see you. Something similar happened to my mum too. She was stopped at a light one day, and when it turned green something compelled her to wait for a second, instead of driving through the intersection. Just as she was about to go so, she didn't make the car behind her mad. A freaking 18-wheeler barreled through a red light. She would have been completely T-boned and most likely dead. She was driving some tiny piece of it Toyota at the time. Had she driven through when she was supposed to? She was so stunned and so was everyone around her that no one even beeped at her to get out of the way when she froze up from shock and ended up sitting through another red light. Green means it's legal to cross, not that it's safe. Always look both ways for the dumbass that ignores the lights. I hadn't been feeling well for a few weeks. Shortness of breath despite being pretty athletic and could feel my heart pounding. I saw my doctor who suggested anxiety, prescribed some meds, and sent me on my way. But I just had this feeling. A few days later I woke up and had trouble walking to the bathroom without losing my breath. I don't know why it even came to mind, but all I could think was something is wrong. This isn't anxiety. I need to go to the ER. So I walked myself to the hospital and asked if it was possible I had a blood clot. Was reassured that if it was a clot in my lung there was no way I could have walked to the hospital. Convinced them to test me anyway and it was a pulmonary embolism. Listen to your instincts, friends. I'm in the process of getting chest pains checked out, which my GP thinks is anxiety even though I'm not experiencing any anxiety at the moment, and haven't done for years. This story scares me. I have anxiety. Sometimes it isn't mental, it's purely physical. And it isn't necessarily due to perceived stress. Anyway, I hope whatever you have is treatable and you feel better soon. I thought I had a chest infection and had my husband drive me to the hospital. Turns out it was pneumonia, a massive clot in my leg and a massive pulmonary embolism. You can definitely walk to a hospital with one. It's known as a silent killer for a reason. I had a medical situation like this. Chest hurt, shortness of breath, sore throat. Went to the doctor, said it was strep, took meds. A week later still didn't feel well. Back to doctor. Doctor says it's bronchitis. Given new meds. Week later, coughing up blood feeling worse. Go back to the doctor for him to say it was still bronchitis. I knew something wasn't right. I was 19, uninsured, and afraid to go to the emergency room. I threw up blood one morning and forced myself to go to the emergency room. Passed out during a CT scan. Remember waking up on a ventilator to my entire family. We're talking aunts, uncles, everyone surrounding me bawling. I can't speak because of the ventilator. Pass out again. Wake up a week later in a city hospital, not knowing what the frick happened. Come to find out when I went to my local, I passed out during the CT scan and was barely breathing. They had to put me on a ventilator to save my life. X-rays were done and it was found out I had pneumonia. But it was such a bad case and was misdiagnosed for so long that both of my lungs were completely filled with fluid besides one little air pocket that the doctor said was the size of a pencil eraser. My local hospital didn't have the means to treat me so they had me airlifted to a big city hospital where after the first night trying to treat me, the pulmonologist prayed with my family and told them I wouldn't make it through the night. I don't know what happened that night, but it's been 7 years, and I'm grateful every day for that pulmonologist and his team. That's horrible that they thought you couldn't have a pulmonary embolism just because you could get to the hospital. Clots present in a lot of different ways. Some of them kill you instantly even if you're in a hospital, and others will be symptomatic for weeks before going for the kill. I'm glad you insisted on not being dismissed. My dad was suffering shortness of breath and fatigue for 3 weeks and didn't want to see a doctor because he didn't want it to interfere with his long planned vacation. Don't even get me started. He went on 10-day sailing trip to a remote area including lots of strenuous stuff like pulling up a heavy anchor and going on hikes. He collapsed 15 hours after getting back to almost civilization. Thankfully he made it to a clinic and then a hospital. Closest real hospital was 2 hours away. He had 36 blood clots surgically removed from his lungs and legs. Finally, I can tell this story. I'll never forget it. I was with a large group of friends including my brother, and we were playing Manhunt outside at night. For those who don't know, Manhunt is just like hide and seek, but it's outside and is a little more complicated. My brother and his friend decide to go into a snowmobile trailer to hide, and I told them I'll hide under the trailer. Little did I know, the trailer was balancing on 2 wheels. As I was under the trailer, I suddenly got the worst feeling that I needed to get out of there. I can't even describe the feeling, but I got out quick. Seconds after I got up, they made the trailer unbalanced by getting inside and it crashed exactly where I just was. There's no doubt it would have killed me in seconds. I stood there in complete shock. I couldn't believe I was so close to death. Did they think they killed you? Yes, they freaked out. Imagine thinking you just killed your brother. Damn, so in the end you lost Huck. He's still hiding from them to this day. I was letting my dog back inside. She walked right past me with no tail wagging or happy smile, walked right through the kitchen without wanting a treat, and went straight to her doggy bed. I knew something wasn't right, and within 10 minutes we were in the car to the emergency vet. She had a tumor rupture apparently. It was clear what needed to be done. Still breaks my heart. That exact thing happened to my dog earlier this year. Like literally the exact thing. I checked to make sure you weren't one of my siblings. I'm sorry about your dog's sad face. Went through a similar thing happen in early November. One of my dogs was outside. It was late, and I was letting the other dogs out. I called him over, and he barely moved. Just kind of looked at me, but not the I'm really tired look. I looked at my husband and said something isn't right. We got him inside. He was acting weird. He didn't eat that day, but I didn't think too much of it at the time, because he was still acting normal. We took him to the emergency vet. He had an enlarged heart and liver. They said they couldn't do anything. We took him home that night. Got up around 9 AM the next day. Took him to our primary vet to be euthanized. He died while waiting on my husband's feet. I had my hand on his chest, and I felt his last heartbeat. Still cry every time I think about it. I think it's only been a little over a month, but it's so hard. We got him cremated. He sleeps on my end table next to my bed.